always actually been drawn to nonogram puzzles, primarily through many nonogram video games that are available these days. You may not be spoiled for choice, but in recent years the puzzle style seems to have really taken off, likely thanks in part to the excellent Piczle Cross titles developed by Jupiter Corporation, which can be found all across the eShop. Beyond those efforts, however, you can find many developers who are taking a stab at the formula themselves, which is how we got Piczle Cross Rune Factory, developed by Score Studios, who previously released Piczle Cross Story of Seasons and Piczle Cross Adventure, have now turned their nonogram expertise toward the world of Rune Factory. Personally, I have very little experience with the Rune Factory series itself, aside from some time spent with the original DS release. Still, I'm a fan of nonograms, so I had a reason to give this game a try. Even if my Rune Factory knowledge is lacking, I hope to at least walk away feeling satisfied by the puzzles. In the best case scenario, it might even encourage me to delve deeper into the Rune Factory series in the future. So let's unpack this experience. For those unfamiliar with nonogram puzzles, here's a brief explanation. Players are presented with a grid of varying sizes, and each column and row has a set of numbers beside it. These numbers act as hints, indicating which squares on the grid should be filled in. You chip away at the grid until you eventually come to an image, which completes the puzzle. Early on, puzzles are extremely easy, with small grids that leave little room for error. As the grids grow smaller, and the hints grow progressively larger though, you can end up spending quite a bit of time on a single puzzle. For me, the appeal is similar to Sudoku or crosswords. It engages the brain in a relaxing way. Sure, you can spend a while butting up against a single puzzle, but in my opinion, the balance between frustration and satisfaction is well maintained. Piczle Cross Rune Factory retains this simple but effective premise and is just as competent as any other nonogram title that I've played in terms of core mechanics. It also provides some nice quality of life upgrades compared to other options on the market, such as the ability to fill in large number of squares at once or zoom in on individual columns and rows. This release offers a sizable collection of traditional monochrome nonograms to complete, and each one can also be played in color mode, which follows slightly different rules. Progression in Piczle Cross only requires you to complete a puzzle in either variation, so you can use whatever you prefer. There are also collage puzzles that require multiple individual monograms to form a much larger image. If you'd rather skip puzzle unlocks or progression entirely, you can switch to puzzle mode, where all puzzles are unlocked from the very beginning. When you add in a range of difficulty options, one of Piczle Cross's greatest strengths is how it lets you tailor the experience to your personal nonogram taste. I do feel the difficulty curve could be a little smoother. Most nonogram games start small and gradually lead you to bigger puzzles, which can be good for newcomers but frustrating for some veterans. Here, in adventure mode, you're introduced to much larger puzzles fairly quickly, though the customization and difficulty options might help you circumvent that issue. Looking at the Rune Factory aspects of the game, it's kind of underwhelming. The visuals largely reuse assets from Rune Factory 5, and while I'm not sure if that was an issue in the original game, everything here seems a bit rough around the edges. Of course, visuals aren't the main draw for a nonogram game, but since there's some clear effort to include fan service for series fans, a bit more polish would have been nice. I don't typically mind reused assets in a cheaper spin-off, but it still feels somewhat disappointing here. I mentioned fan service earlier because Piczle Cross Rune Factory features a compendium with art and references to other Rune Factory titles, primarily the 3rd, 4th, and 5th entries. The music in the game also comes from the Rune Factory series. I imagine the focus on these titles is because the 3rd and 4th entries have modern special releases, and the 5th is the latest in the mainline entry. Still, more dedicated Rune Factory fans might be disappointed that the older entries aren't more fully represented. Perhaps the most significant Rune Factory element here is the customization farm diorama. Completing certain puzzles lets you decorate your farm or your character. You could use crops, monster helpers, or new equipment, and you can even unlock some of the spouses, so the developers clearly wanted to reward players for their puzzling efforts. Whether that's satisfying or not probably depends on individual tastes, and while I do appreciate it as a nice gauge of progress, for me the real satisfaction still comes from solving the puzzles themselves. There's not that much more to say about the Piczle Cross Rune Factory release. It's a perfectly serviceable nonogram puzzler that offers plenty of customization and some welcome quality of life improvements. There's a substantial amount of content for longtime nonogram fans, and newcomers should find it easy to learn the basics. The Rune Factory flair is a nice touch for those familiar with the series, but this particular release isn't really beginner-friendly enough if you're new to nonograms. If you have any nonogram experience at all, you could do far worse. And if you're simply looking for a big batch of new puzzles to solve, this release will suit you nicely. Noisy Pixel is giving Piczle Cross Rune Factory a 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.